Welcome to Issaquah Christian Church.
It's really interesting to think about hope for Haiti. Is that a thing? When you're in the valley of the shadow of death, it's hard to know what that's going to look like. But sometimes there's a glimmer from the mountaintops, like a little snow peak up there. I was texting with Doug the other day, and I remember kind of concluding that, you know what, as long as God knows what he's doing on the mountains, I can trust him while I'm in this valley. Right? As long as he does the things that I don't know. I don't know what God's up to. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what he's doing in the brokenness in your family right now. I don't know what he's doing in the turmoil around your employment. I don't know what he's doing in your impending loss or recovery from the loss that you've experienced. I don't know what he's doing. I'm not even going to pretend. But can we get to a point where we trust him and say, okay, well, whatever you're doing up there, as long as you're with me in the valley, as long as you're with me in the valley, that's going to be enough. Right? Can we trust him there? Because is it possible that God knows what he's up to? Is it possible that he knows what he's up to in your life? Yeah, church? Is it possible? Knowing what we know about God and the ministry of Jesus, would you say it's probable? Can we move it toward likely? Can we say, no, yes, that's what it means to trust him. He knows what he's doing, and he can manage these variables, which seem to you like chaos, and to him seem like opportunity. The little bit of hope, the hope flickering that says, wow, there's maybe some possibility here. As Jesus journeys toward Jerusalem, and that's what we're going to look at next week, and Doug's going to preach on the Palm Sunday. That's next Sunday. But as Jesus was taking his ministry and then moving toward Jerusalem, there was a shadow that fell over his ministry. It wasn't happy. It was an impending loss. But yet there's this tension between a triumphal hope and this impending loss. He set his face toward Jerusalem. Do you guys remember that idea in Scripture? He sets his face toward it. You're not going to deter me. Well, do you think there was some temptation to not go to Jerusalem for Jesus on that day, during that time? Because that's where he was going to give up his life. That's where he was going to offer himself as a ransom for many on the cross. And when you're facing that down, you have to be very resolute. And so the shadows are gathering around Jesus. He paints a huge target on his back. He's like, come at me, dark powers. From the transfiguration event where it's like, this is who he is, the eternal one right here on this mountain. He's all the way down through the proclamation that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Peter, from there on out, it was this like, come at me, bro. And the dark powers started to gather around Jesus until that week that we'll look at, called Holy Week, coming up after Palm Sunday, when everything was going forward toward his death, and also this tension of hope coming at the same time. Very interesting. Jesus is welcomed, and we'll look at this next week, into Jerusalem, the holy city, as a savior with people. They used palm branches because they didn't have party poppers, but I think it would have been very similar, right? I think it would have been very similar. But the week going into this John's Gospel, there's this deep sadness, this mourning. There's this death of Lazarus. There's all these things happening in this apprehension. But what I want to do is just read the Bible to you, because you probably don't have that happen enough. And against custom, I'm not going to interrupt myself. I'm just going to read it to you. We'll see. I'll have Josiah advance the slides since they're blurry on my screen. Now, a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary, who we'll find out in a minute later, who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. Okay, Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It's for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, let's go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you're going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. After saying these things, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. The disciples said, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest and sleep. And Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died. And for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's all also go so that we may die with him. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, and go ahead and read this part with me. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, and maybe you can too, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. I'll go on. When she said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher's here, and he's calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out there, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him? But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? And then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he's been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. When he'd said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it's better for you that one man should die for the people than that the whole nation should perish." He didn't say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they had made plans to put him to death. Jesus therefore no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went from there to a region near the wilderness to a town called Ephraim, and there he stayed with his disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. They were looking for Jesus, saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? Do you think he's not even going to come to the feast at all?" Now the chief priests and Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, they should let him know so they could arrest him. 6 days before Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom he'd raised from the dead. So they gave him a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he was about to betray him, said, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. Having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you will always have with me, but you do not always have me." When the large crowd of the Jews learned that Jesus was there, they came not only on the account of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to put Lazarus to death as well, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and believing in Jesus. There's a lot there, and I'm going to go back through and just pick a few points out, but does that stir any questions in you? Just real quick. I have 100 questions, but I'm not going to burden you with those. But do you have any questions just kind of rising out of just what we read? As you think about Jesus headed toward Jerusalem, about to be betrayed, that's predicted in here, anointed for his burial by Mary. But any questions that just come up as you think about life and hope? Ken? Yeah. Jesus was frustrated that his disciples didn't quite get it, right? Even after this, they continued to have something blocking. Yeah. What do you guys think that is? Why? I'd like to think that they were the dull ones and I'm the enlightened one, but that's probably not the case. I think it comes back to what I mentioned earlier, is if Jesus is who he says he is, we all have a lot of explaining to do. I mean, we take his role in our lives kind of not seriously sometimes. Just, oh yeah, well, it's good to believe. It's good to be a believer. Okay, well, but there's a lot more to who Jesus is than just what we can see right there. It's very interesting, yeah. I appreciate that. Any other questions or thoughts about that? Yeah. Well, here's kind of a question, what is with Jesus waiting in the midst of that, right? Well, as it comes to our lives, then we have this question, why does Jesus wait so long? We sang a song that he comes at the right time when we least expect it. Is this the right time, Jesus? Is this the right time? Is this the right time? There's a lot of tension around, are you going to do this thing for my brother, for us, really, at this time when I need it? And then the question comes, can I trust him? Connor.
I didn't just go in there
Not just going through his pockets and looking for loose change. Yeah, yeah. No, but he was. Yeah, he was. He was all dead. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tension in this passage with our own walk with Jesus. There's just like, why isn't he coming at this time? And then what good would that do? We ask. Why doesn't he show up in this way and in that way in your own personal lives and your losses, your tragedies? Like, But why? And I wonder if he would just put his arms around you and weep with you. Yeah, it's hard. Why couldn't it have been this way? Why couldn't my family have looked like this, or my marriage have looked like this, or why couldn't have? And I that's mountaintop kind of conversations that we don't have a lot of access to. But I bet he would come around you and weep. He certainly has with me. And so it's not so much about knowing the details, it's about knowing the King, right? And that he's with you, and he's for you, and he's going to make you like himself. And that's our commitment to one another, and that's our commitment there. But I think sometimes we worry that we're supposed to be the ones with a great faith. And so I'm going to do a classic 3-point sermon to this today, and I'm just going to say point number 1, we're trusting in a great God. We're not trusting in a great faith. Like some of you have amazing trust and ability and all, but it really only takes this much in a God that is that great. And so I don't want you to feel discouraged because, well, I'm not quite trusting so much. I feel like there's this lens that I don't have, and I want God to pull that aside so I can trust him more, and I want to see him better, and I want to know who he truly is. The trust is in the great God. When Jesus, this is John 11:33, back in this passage, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was greatly moved in his spirit and troubled. And then later, Jesus predicts his death, of course, and invites people to follow the way of the Master, to give up your life. You have to have trust in a great God. For you to just skip out on everything the world offers and the idols of this age offer, to say, no, I'm actually going to trust God. It means a step back from the world and then a step forward toward Jesus. And it takes everything. To give up your comfort zone and to extend yourself, to talk to that neighbor, to hand an invitation to Easter, or to offer to pray for somebody, takes great trust in a really amazing God. And so I think the problem is not so our own self-concept. I just wish I was more confident. I wish I was more this. Or I wish you knew who God really was. That's actually what I wish. I don't need you to, I don't need to correct and adjust your faith. I need you to get your vision right on who God actually is. It's a little kitschy, but don't tell God how big your problems are. Tell your problems how big your God is. No, but this is who I trust in, and that is what matters. Martha saying, "Yes, Lord, I believe you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world." What really matters is putting our faith in the right person. Not so much the quantity of faith. The all-powerful Creator working through Jesus Christ by the Holy Spirit. This is who we trust. Even a tiny peephole of faith. Like if you could just do this with me real quick. You don't need this much to see things that are that far away, right? Just a tiny peephole of faith directed toward God grants us access to the unimaginable power and guidance. Now, I love big windows. And the front of my house has really big windows. But if you get close enough, you can see it all right through the pinhole, right? We have an eclipse coming up on April 8th. Of course, we're not in the zone. So, sorry. Although my wife reports that you can buy a ticket on, is it a United flight? Or Delta has a flight to follow the path of the eclipse for those of you adventure travelers that want to spend that much time on a plane. to look at the sun. With my luck, since I always want an aisle seat, I wouldn't see a thing anyway. Right? But you don't need much to see it all coming through, right? That, in fact, just enough grip, just enough view of a great God is going to suffice. And then the next thing would be to proclaim that trust, right? So if the first thing is trust in God, a great God, not trusting in your great faith, well, I think I've got enough today, so maybe I should be good enough to be a good Christian. Like, no, trust in him. But then proclaim that trust. This is where we fall short. We fall short. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And we say with her, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. So you got to trust in a great God. But then Martha's unwavering example, no, I do believe this. This is the truth. I have something I can proclaim. Even in grief and confusion, at least you know this one thing. Like, I don't know what's going on the mountaintop. I don't know. I know what's going on in the valley, but this is the one thing I know. I know that God lives, and I know that my Redeemer is coming, and I have hope. So in the midst of it all, we can believe that God knows what he's doing. This concept kind of resonates with Romans 10, 9, and 10. You know, I'm extracting this from a large theological argument for why Gentiles and Jews should sit down at the same table. Really, remember, what brings you together is your confession. But if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. I wonder if you could do this for me. And don't share this list with anybody, but I'd like you to make a little list. The kind of the when and where. If it's a mental list, it's fine. When and where you're most timid about your faith. About proclaiming that Jesus is Lord. That God raised him from the dead. That my salvation is secured by the King of Kings. That it's my heart that I've given to him, and that's how I'm saved and believed and I'm justified, and then with my mouth I confess, and that's where my salvation is. I want you to just think, when and where am I most timid about that? And then get a little curious, why? I can only think of like 12 examples in this last week, honestly. So for me, you know, I can think of these just like, why don't I speak up? Why don't I mention that? Why don't I... What is it about me that says, no, this place, no, these people, no. We don't do that here or there with these people because Jesus isn't Lord? Because God didn't raise him from the dead? No. He did. So he is Lord. Well, maybe I was worried they wouldn't want to believe in Jesus. They get to do that. But I mean, the cost of discipleship, church, is difficult. I mean, how many of you know the cost of discipleship, of being an apprentice of Jesus, is difficult? Put that in one balance here. The cost of discipleship is, wow, it's pretty difficult. Have you thought about the cost of non-discipleship? Oh. The cost of seeing in your life, okay, so I see you believe that Jesus is Lord, that God raised him from the dead, and you proclaim that trust. This is something that you are doing. So they see your life and they see that you trust and you've declared Jesus to them. You've offered, you know, Jesus is Lord and you can trust him and he can save you, he can rescue you from your life. And God has through Jesus, all the resources are there to actually have the life you've always wanted, reconciled to God the Father. I mean, you've offered this to them and they're like, I just don't think so. Okay, we get that, right? Because the cost of discipleship is big, but also the cost of non-discipleship. Wow. Where does a life go like that? So we've got to openly declare it. And if you have a hang up, then okay, just name it, at least for yourself. Name the hang up. Yep. When I'm here, we don't talk about that. When I'm over here, this isn't a thing. Jesus comes in and out of his lordship, whoa, 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 like a microphone and an amp, right? It's just like, and now he's Lord, and then now, woo, keep it quiet, and now he's Lord, and then, woo, hush for a while, and then now he's Lord. Come on, people. He is or he isn't. Say it with me. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who's coming into the world. You're not coming in and out of that. You're coming in. You reign supreme. This is what our worship should do. This is what our Sunday mornings should do. This is what our worship practice here should do. Is like, oh yeah, that's right. Wow, how did I forget that? And the bleep, bleep, just through your life, just on and off, on and off, on and off, on the throne, off the throne, on the throne, off the throne. Boy, Jesus must be. Maybe he gets a little fuzzy-headed, getting in on and off the throne so often last week, right? Getting vertigo based on your worship patterns, right? He is Lord. Let's remind each other of that continually, and then we got to reflect that light. So if we're trusting in a great God, not a great faith, and like, well, today's just not a great faith day. Well, he's still on the throne, right? And then we're going to proclaim that trust. Then reflect that light. Reflect that light. And I'll just read this to you. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time, this is Paul again writing to that church, the house churches in Rome. He's Apostle Paul, and he's been beaten, left for dead, shipwrecked, all the things, poor, sick, all the things. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed in us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. Until now. That was 2,000 years ago. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, we who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we eagerly await for the adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what he already sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Jesus, the first fruits of our hope. If Jesus is raised, then your hope is secure, church. If Jesus is raised, your hope is secure. That's where it rests. He is the first fruits, the beginning of it all. So even in the valley, even in loss, even in financial ruin, even in, whatever, moral bankruptcy, even in the midst of it all, Jesus is on the throne and a glorious future awaits. And we have the opportunity then to reflect that to other people. I wonder if we will. But our hope, reflecting this promise, should illuminate the path, not just for ourselves, but for other people as well. I'm in the valley of the shadow of death. Follow me as I follow Christ. And you see that little glint on the mountaintop? That's God up to something. And you hear his footfall with me? That's him with us. And let's go together in the midst of it. Jesus holds the tension of glory and suffering and justice and love right there on the cross. His wounded hands hold your heart. He described the cross that he would be exalted on as his throne. I'm going to be exalted. I'm going to be lifted up. I'm going to be, whoa, that's some kind of exaltation. Yes, it is. So if you're wondering, where am I going to find a leader who can hold in tension suffering and hope, anticipation of glory at the same time as just what feels like ruin? Well, let's look to Jesus. Come on, church. Look to Jesus. Let's not just talk about it. Let's reflect it. This week, I just want you to choose one action. Choose one action that embodies the hope that you have. Some kind of activity, some kind of action, some kind of step, some kind of move in your life that even kind of astounds you. Like, well, I guess if I did really trust that Jesus is on the throne, and if I did have a hope that makes sense of this chaos and this mess, if I had that, then why wouldn't I do that sort of a thing? And just think of a thing that you could do. Let the Spirit stir in your heart. Like, oh, okay, this week I think I'm going to actually take that step. I've been like, that seems crazy. But in light of Christ on the throne, in light of the hope that I have, I think I'm going for it. And just change that to I am going for it, right? I'm going to do it because that would proclaim the trust that I have. That would reflect the light. That would show that I have a trust in God, not so much just my own wavering, selfish self-confidence. Let's just take a moment, pray, and ask God to give you an assignment, okay? Jesus, would you just stand and let us come to you and get our assignments? Lord, would you assign us the task that you have for us? God, give us something to do that's so audaciously wrapped up in hope in you and in your resurrection that it even makes our heads spin. How about one that makes your head spin, if that's possible? And we want to be people of faith, of hope, and of love. We want to be people that do hard things and know that we've got a loving family right here in this room to come back to and talk to and get charged up and head back into that work. Jesus, send your church. We pray that you would send workers into the field and send your church. Amen.